Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Yeah, hi, my name is Pat Devaney and I'm an alcoholic. George, happy birthday. Happy birthday to everybody else and the newcomers too. It's great. I'm glad I'm here. I sweat a lot, so I have to take the clothes off. It's for the newcomers too, to show that you can afford a suit after a while. I'm not going to use any four-letter words tonight because I used them all up on the 405 freeway getting here. It's none left. I grew up in a place called New York City, and thank you. Gives you a boo. And long line of alcoholics. My father was in the saloon business, and I was the guy who my mother would send for me to get him. And it was my sister and I, and my father never laid a hand on either one of us. He was a very gentle, very kind guy, but a bad drinker. He was a hard-working guy, but just once he'd start on the booze, boom. And I used to say for years and years, I'll never get like that. I won't drink when I get older. And my mother would say to me, that's very nice, Pat, that's very nice. She knew it was bullshit. And like she would say to me, Pat, go up and get your father. So I'd go up to the Triangle Bar, and I'd walk in, the bartender say, it's in the back room. And my father was a great dresser. The Hamburg had to be on the table, Chesterfield coat, and he'd be passed out, and I'd shake him, and he'd say, yeah, and I'd say, you know, Mom wants you to come home. And he'd get up, and we'd go home and down the hill, and then we'd make the turn up the hill, and he fell in the hedges. And I got so embarrassed. I just wanted to punch him. You know, but he was my father, and I loved him. And so I reached in, and I knew everybody was looking. And I pulled him out of the hedges. Well, it was New York City. Nobody cares. They're all worried about themselves. They don't care who's in the hedges. And I pull him out and do him. So I always had that thing. And in school, I was a complete scholastic disaster. And John Pettit gave me a thing tonight about his son who went to West Point, and I have it in my thing. His son was in the lower 10% of his graduation class. I was either last or second. The brothers wouldn't say, you know. So they sent me off to this boarding school because I was a scholastic disaster from the 4th grade until I said I didn't want to be a boarder anymore. And the brothers were very, very good to me, and I just had a horrible, horrible time learning. I still can't spell. I'm a very slow reader, but I'm good in math. That's the only thing, one of my qualities. I can remember a few things. So I always felt very inferior because I was. When you're in a school, in fact, this school made Newsweek magazine as one of the best schools in the country. It's now Archbishop Malloy. It used to be St. Anne's Academy on Lexington Avenue. I gave the school a plug if you want to send any money. And you know, the brothers were there, and school was great. And I always felt inferior. And the only thing that I could do better than the rest was that I could run faster and jump higher than the rest of the kids. And I wound up on the track team. And my first drink that I ever had, I was 17 years old. I was a late bloomer. And it was right after the National High School Championship at Madison Square Garden. I had won a medal, and we left Madison Square Garden, and we were going into Elmhurst, and we went to the Hofbrau Bar in Elmhurst, and it was my guy who became my brother-in-law, Larry, and a guy by the name of Spook. And Spook started saying words at the bar, and the bartender, I don't know whether he knew my father or what, but he said to me, this was like after the third beer, he said to me, you know, he said, you're better than these other guys. You shouldn't be doing this. And that sort of always, that stuck with me. I knew I wasn't better, but he said there was something different about me. I guess it was the way I was drinking, the way he looked at me. And I had no big revolution, no, oh, this is the greatest. I drank them, and I sort of felt funny when drinking them, you know, because of my father. But that was the start. And then it went on, and by my senior year, I was drinking real bad. On weekends, I was a weekend drinker and stuff like that. And I had it in my head that in order for me to go to college, I had to win 3 gold medals in the city championship in the track and field thing in New York City. So the first day of the, and then the schools that I wanted to go to, then they couldn't refuse. They'd have to take me. I was Mr. Wonderful. So the first day of the meet, it was over Randall's Island. I won the high jump and I won the long jump. And then this guy said, the coach of Fordham Prep said to me, Pat, do you want to ride across the bridge? I said, and another guy said to me, Pat, do you want to go for a couple of beers over in Harlem? I said, yeah. And the most important thing in my life, and I'm saying, yeah, I'm going to go have a few beers. And he said to me, Pat, do you need a ride? I said, no, I'm walking. And I always took a ride. I didn't want to walk. But we walked across the bridge, we went into Harlem, we put the money on the bar, and we started drinking. I got a buzz on. I didn't get real drunk. But the point I'm trying to make is that this part of my life at 18 was so important for me to do this. But when it came to drinking, or the most important thing in my life, drinking came first. And the next day, I got lucky, and I won. And the schools I wanted to go to, they still didn't want me. So I fixed them. I went in the Navy. And in high school, my sister used to say to me, Pat, she went to an all-girls school, Pat, would you like to go out with so-and-so? I'd say, Maureen, does she drink? And she could be gorgeous. And if she didn't drink, I didn't go out with her. Consequently, I went out with a lot of homely girls, but they drank, and I didn't care. And we had a good time. And as I started getting a few hints while I was in the Navy, and by then I was starting to put 2 and 2 together that I had a drinking problem. But I was down in Guantanamo. We had about 500 guys in the CB battalion that I was in, and one of my shipmates said to me, you know, Pat, when you go on liberty, no one in this battalion looks sharper than you. The way your shoes will shine, the way your uniform hangs on you, the way you carry yourself, and I like that. He said, well, when you come back, nobody looks worse. I was a wreck. The uniforms were a mess. I'd be in the bottom of the Liberty boat. You know, it was just a disaster. And then I had another little hint. One guy said to me, Devaney, put you in a room with a naked woman and a bottle of whiskey, and you'll drink the whiskey first and go for the woman second. I denied that, but that was true. The booze always came first. Everything else came second. Well, I couldn't stop. I never really tried to stop drinking, and then I met this girl, and it was wonderful. Her name was Grace, and she was a friend of my sister's, and she drank like I drank. And it was great. And I'm up at the University of Rhode Island at the time, and she'd come up to see me, and I'd go down to the city, and we'd just get bombed out of our skull, and it was a wonderful romance. And we decided to get married. And we got married, and we went off to, I hated the University of Rhode Island with a passion. That was another episode. It was a dual meet at Brown. I went down there. I drove my own car. The athletic department, I hated them. They hated me too. I seldom went on the team bus. I used to take my own car, because whenever I did that, I always got drunk. So I took my own car down to Brown, had the dual meet, didn't even shower, anything, kept the meet clothes on, drove back to Narragansett Pier, walked into the bar, put money on the bar. The bartender said to me, "You can't be dressed like this in here." I said, "Never mind, give me a beer." So he gave me the beer, and I started drinking, and he says, "There's a professor in the back room." Oh, Jesus. my cover will be blown. So I go in the back room. The professor is totally bombed out of his sky, hanging on the table. Give me another one. And I just kept going. So I had no respect for my team, no respect for myself, the school, or anything. Well, my true love and I now, we're married, and I go out to Arizona State, and we're out there, and all of a sudden, my great drinking partner says to me, Pat, your drinking is abnormal. My drinking's abnormal. She would start to yell and scream at me when I wouldn't come home. And I'd come home drunk, and I'd be a mess and everything else. And she'd say, oh, I was worried about you. I said, well, if we drink together. Then she'd say, Pat, you have a career. You have your education to finish. I would think, a career? What career? I don't know who's going to have a career. and talk these strange things, but was always screaming and yelling about my drinking. And then the baby started to come along. And next thing, she stopped screaming and yelling at me. Now, for the first baby, she was in Phoenix. I was in New York, drunk at the New York AC. And I wasn't there when the first baby was born. I had a real lousy attitude about that. And drunk there and drunk in New York, I come back to the hospital like it's no big deal. But it was a big deal. It was her first baby, and it was very, very important. But I acted very cavalier like it was nothing. And she's screaming and yelling all the time. And finally I'm out of school, and the screaming and yelling, finally all of a sudden the screaming and yelling stops. And she says to me, Pat, have you noticed I'm not screaming and yelling at you anymore? And I went, I don't want to mess up a good thing. And I said, yeah. And she said, well, I want to tell you something. You know, I know you have a drinking problem, but I found a thing called Al-Anon. And basically what she said, in order to keep her own sanity, and if she loves this person who's an alcoholic, you know, blah, 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 whatever else. And she said, would you like to go to an AA meeting? I'm 28 years old. I had black hair. And you know what I saw at that meeting? A bunch of white-haired old bastards, just like I have tonight. And there were guys with brown hair and no hair and all different types. I didn't see any. I only saw the old guys. And I looked, and the lady who spoke, she was wonderful. It was in Scottsdale, Arizona, when I went to that first meeting. And I was sober as I am tonight. And I said, geez, that was all very nice, and the steps, everything was just great. And I said, well, when I get that old and that bad, that's when I'll do it. So now my career, I'm out of school. My career didn't skyrocket. It just sort of went like this. I wound up in the socks and jock business, the athletic business, calling on colleges and high school. It was perfect for me. It's a job made for me. I was out in the field, and I did very, very well. And they sent me over to LA, and I had the territory here with UCLA and SC, and you know, all the good schools. And you know, I'm going up. We get the house, you know, driving the Lincolns, and you know, we got all the nice things. But Pat's doing his thing, getting drunk all the time, and I got all the way down to I was working a day and a half a week. But Irv never knew this, because I was an outside guy. So as long as business is coming in, I'm a hero. And when the phone would ring, I'd go, oh, Jesus, I know it's Irv. He never called the house. You know, my hangovers and stuff like that. And Grace would always say, it's for you. Oh, God, I hate this. So the drinking is going on, and she took me to that meeting, and periodically I would go to a meeting when the heat got on. And I'm sitting in a bar like a 25-year-old guy, birthday boy tonight, and there are two other guys sitting there, and one guy starts saying to me, you know, Pat, he says, geez, he says, I have a real drinking problem. He says, I think I'm alcoholic. I go, oh, yeah, that's nice, yeah. And the other guy sitting next to him is going, tee-hee-hee-hee. And he keeps talking about something. Then he said the word Al-Anon. I went, now I knew he had a problem. And he said, you know, my wife goes to Al-Anon, he says, and there's a gal that picks her up with a little blue Volkswagen. He says, she's good looking too. He said, I'd like to know who the heck she is. I said, it sounds like my wife. He says, I didn't know you had a drinking problem. I said, I've been drinking on and off with this guy for about 4 or 5 years in a wonderful place called the Blarney Cove, one of the real shit houses in the West Valley. And I would leave there periodically when the conversation went a little downhill, and I would wander to the other places. And he said to me, would you take me to, have you ever been to an AA meeting? I said, yeah, I've been to 3 in 9 years. So he says to me, could you take me to a meeting? I said, yeah, I'll take you. I'm drinking. I'm taking him nowhere. The other guy's sitting there going, tee-hee, tee-hee. And he says, let's meet at the deli in the morning. Let's finish our drinks and go home. I said, you finish yours. I'm staying. So the other 2 guys, Phil and Bill, they finished their drinks and they went home. And I stayed and I got bombed out of my skull. And the next morning, the phone rings. Now, of course, I think it's Irv again, who never calls. And Grace says, Pat, it's for you. Oh, Jesus Christ. I picked up, hello? Pat, it's Phil. We're here at the deli. I thought you were going to take us to a meeting. I don't know why. I said, I'll be right there. I never got out of bed with a hangover. I was drunk, and my hangovers were horrendous. When I walked into a bar, I dropped anchor. I was going nowhere but until I was completely paralyzed, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, then I would go home. And so I get out of bed, throw some water on my face, go downstairs. Grace is at the kitchen sink. The kids are gone to school. She sees this thing moving in the morning. She can't believe it. And she goes, where are you going? I said, a couple of guys want me to take them to an AA meeting. She almost fell over with laughter. But it was very funny. I get to the deli, and here's Phil and Bill and the bartender's there. As we say, they're growing in numbers. But the bartender, he didn't need it. He wound up with vehicular manslaughter in Indiana and wound up in jail. So anyway, Phil and Bill, they wanted to go. So I made the phone call, and it was a noontime meeting at a place called The Nest on Reseda Boulevard and Sherman Way. This is before tattoos were real popular. Most of the ladies had them then, and it was pretty bad. And I said, well, there's this meeting at Nest, and they said, well, let's go have a couple of drinks. I said, no drinking until after the meeting. I don't know where that came from either. They believed me. Off we went. So we went and we shot pool and we told lies to each other, and it was almost 12 o'clock, so we went off to this meeting. We're at the meeting, and these looked like real alcoholics. I mean, this was a seedy crowd. And I said, hey, this is what it's supposed to be, because some of those other meetings, I mean, they were like dressed. So I heard whoever spoke and everybody shared. And then they said, does anybody have any questions? And when I want something, or I'm going someplace, I'm like, nothing stops me. You can put me in a room without a door, all cement, and somehow I get out. I don't know how I do it, but I do. And when I have that like tunnel vision. Boom. So I put up my hand, and I said, yeah. I said, the only problem I have is I can't stop drinking. And they all laughed. And it pissed me off. And so I said, to hell with them. And I sat down. And then after the meeting's over, I'm standing there, and we're going, and this guy comes up to me. George knows this guy. This guy's name is Dick Sheen. I'll break his anonymity because he loves it. And he's a used car salesman, and he says, hi, he said to me, he says, you look like you're Irish, you look like you're Catholic, you look like you're from the big city, and it looks like you want to get sober. I thought, what is this, multiple choice? He was right on 3 of them. He was wrong. I wasn't here to get sober. I'm taking these other 2 schmoes to the meeting. So he says to me, would you like to go to a meeting tonight? I said, yeah, okay. So he starts telling me, don't worry about those guys who laughed at you because you said you don't have any problem except you can't stop drinking. And we go to this meeting. And it was a nice meeting. And I came down to pick him up, and I had the Lincoln Continental. He gets in the Lincoln, and he says, geez, I never worked with a high-bottom drunk before. I didn't know whether that was good or bad, but it sounded good. So I said, okay. So off we go. And he had a roommate that was running around all the time. So now Dick starts telling me, don't take the first drink. It's the first drink that gets you drunk. Alcoholism is a disease, allergy to your body, and an obsession of the mind. And he's going on and on and on and on. I heard all this stuff from Grace for 9 years. All that literature you got back there, you got a lot of literature. In my house, that was peanuts. We had literature all over the place. She'd bring home, we had the big book. I used to use it for a coaster in the living room when I play my Irish records. I want to hear that one again. The big book, the little book, she had Bob found it, lost it, didn't know what to do with it. She had all this stuff. So Dick is taking me to meetings, and we're going to meetings, and then he would get me in the car, and he would talk to me for 45 minutes. And Dick has a good mouth on him, and he's good. And he's telling me about Alcoholics Anonymous, and he says to me, Pat, you look like a guy who's never surrendered. I was the guy that used to bang their head in the gravel. You surrender, you. Boom, boom, boom. And knocked in and out of the oleander bushes. I'd come back out, boom, back in the oleander bushes. Scrapes all over me. I didn't get beat up a lot, but a few times I did. They weren't very pleasant. And Dick is telling me all this stuff, so he says to me, you look like a guy who never surrendered. So I said, yeah. So he said, let me tell you something. He said, the Germans and the Japanese fought the Second World War. I'm going, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. He said, the Germans and Japanese, they surrendered unconditionally. In the First World War, the Germans surrendered with conditions. But in the Second World War, they surrendered unconditionally, and so did the Japanese. He said, and now the Germans and the Japanese are 2 and 3 economically in the world. Do you understand, Pat? They surrendered, and now they won. He said, and that's how Alcoholics Anonymous works. He said, we surrendered to drinking. We stopped fighting it, doing all the things that you always did. You surrender, and then you win. I like that. I thought that was okay. So now I meet another guy, a guy by the name of Jimmy Grennan. Jimmy is deceased now, so he doesn't care either about his identity. And I met a guy by the name of Father Ted, too. Father Ted's deceased, too. So Jimmy says to me, Pat, come on, I want to take you to a meeting. He said, I want you to be the 10-minute speaker. I said, I was like sober 32, 33 days. I said, I don't know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous, and he talked like this. He was from Manhattan, and he graduated from a Catholic grammar school, and he used to go back to class reunions. And there would be people there at this reunion, like, 6 or 8 of them, He used to tell me, I go, wow. So Jimmy was a D's, Dems, and Does, and he was a carpet salesman. Dick was a used car salesman. Dick was also gay. I didn't know it. I didn't care. And he used to ask me about gay things all the time. I didn't even think. I'm the last guy. It's always on that. Everybody knew that Dick was gay, except me. I think it was 10 years, 11 years later, George called me and said, Chet left Dick. I said, so what? He'll get another roommate. He said, Pat, don't you realize he's gay? I said, you remember that phone call? So he said, oh my God. A couple of minutes later, Dick called me and said, oh, Pat, I don't know why I never told you. I don't know either. So anyway, Jimmy Grennan says, let's go to this. He says, you're the 10-minute speaker. I said, I don't know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous. He says, I know that. You just tell him how you drank and how you got sober and how you're staying sober for 32 days or whatever it was. I said, okay. So I did the shtick. This was a breakfast meeting. We leave the breakfast meeting. He says, let's go to Denny's. I said, we just had breakfast. Going to Denny's. He said, we'll have coffee. We had coffee there. I didn't drink coffee. So we sit down, and he starts giving me the yay shtick. And I'm listening. And I said to him, how long are you sober? He says, 14 years. I thought, 14 years, you're full of shit. No real alcoholic can stay sober for 14 years. He says to me this fast, you think I'm full of shit, no real alcoholic? I went, yeah. He says to me, Pat, I'm just as far away from being drunk as you are. I take one drink after my 14 years, it means nothing. I'm drunk and my 14 years are gone. You take one drink after your 30-something days, he says, and you're drunk again. He says, we're all the same in Alcoholics Anonymous, whether I have 14 years or you have 30 days. It's all one day at a time. I bought that. I said, damn it, that's pretty good. He says, come on, I want to meet you. I want to introduce you to another guy. We're going over to Crespi High School. Crespi High School? It's one of my accounts. They can't know that I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I'd be embarrassed because I never called on the school when I was drinking. Once I had a drink, forget it. My car was always breaking down. If I had an appointment at UCLA, Coach, yeah, I'm sorry, my car broke down yesterday. I'll see you this afternoon, or I'll see you tomorrow. Oh, that's okay, Pat. I had like throwaway cars. Every 2 years in those days, you would get a new car. So, anyway, so he takes me over to Crespi, and he brings me in, and who do I meet but a guy by the name of Father Ted. Father Ted had a stroke, and he talked like this. So now I got the gay finger-snapping used car salesman. I got these dems and does from the 8th grade, and now I have a broken-down old priest. I say, hello, how are you, and everything. I thought he was drunk the night before. You talk like this. So Father Ted grabs this little white flag, and he hands me this little white flag. After Dick doing the thing of surrender, and Ted says, Pat, this is the flag of surrender. I give this to all, I'm not going to keep doing his voice, because I give this to all my new friends and blah, blah, blah. And, a little kiss ass that I am. I said, oh, thank you very much. I really wanted to stick it up his nose. But, with a little old priest, what do? You say thank you. So the guy said to me, Pat, and I was waiting for the Holy Roller stuff to start coming out. And he says to me, Pat, you don't call me Father Ted. He said, I don't call you salesman Pat or anything, or entrepreneur Pat, or whatever. He says, we're all the same. He says, I'm just Ted. And I like that too. And then he said, I never knew what it was to be a real priest until I got into Alcoholics Anonymous. And you won't know what it is to be a real father and a real businessman until you're sober. I always remembered that, because when he said that he was never a real priest, never knew what it was to be, I like that. I bought that too. And then I started, staying sober, going to meetings, and the guys would call me. Guys came and got me there in that West Valley. Come on, Pat. I don't want to go to the meeting. I don't want to go. No, we're going to come by. We'll pick you up. And they'd come by and pick me up, and I thank those guys for doing that in that early sobriety. And then they made me the VP of sales, and I was only sober like, maybe 60 days or whatever, maybe less. And now I'm on and off airplanes, and now I go from working a day and a half a week to working like 14, 16 hours a day. Total lunatic. And the company is getting business like they can't believe. Jesus, this guy's and I was a lunatic. I wanted to throw the pilot out of the seat and fly the plane myself, because we weren't getting places fast enough. Before, my head, jeez, I'm dying. So now I'm staying sober, and I'm going to meetings in different places around the country, and all over, and I'm working hard and going crazy, and Grayson, and then we have another baby, and it's goofy time. And then I committed economic suicide with this company, and we departed. And the house. By this time, I had a house on the East Coast and the West Coast. I used to joke about it. Does anybody have a house on the East Coast and West Coast? And I rented the house on the West Coast to Roy Rogers' daughter. She was very nice. Everybody was in the master bedroom except Trigger. This place, they had a bunch of kids, and by the time I got the house back, there was fingerprints all over, and it was just crazy. And I don't think they must have cooked with a grease machine, because you could peel the grease off the kitchen ceiling. So anyway, the house on the East Coast, that went bye-bye. The cars went, and I'm back, and we're finally all back in the house in the West Valley, and things are really, really tough. I mean, everything is gone and going. And I'm still going to meetings, and I'd say, oh my God, this work, and the guys would say, Pat, don't drink and things will get better. Don't drink and things will get better. I'm listening. Don't drink and things will get better. Don't drink and things. Now I'm off in the boondocks of Texas. I'm training insurance salesmen selling disability insurance. If you want a gross job, this is it. I mean, it's the pits. And I would go to meetings. And if you ever been to a meeting in the middle of Texas, I was at this meeting in a bank. And the banker owned, he was an AA, and I was like a teeny bopper at this meeting. All these guys were ancient, and they had a higher power, and his name was Jesus Christ, and you better not forget it, boy. And it was the alcohol that got them drunk. If I heard the word alcohol one more time, I was ready to jump out the window. Thank God the bank was on the ground floor, and it was just cuckoo time. I got to wrap this up at 5:02 because I have instructions. No souls are saved. It used to be after 9 o'clock. No souls are saved here after 8:55. So anyway, I'm going. I'm staying sober. I'm going to all these meetings and everything. And Grace is, I'm home, and I'm starting to import athletic shoes and doing crazy stuff. She's saying, oh, God, she says, I don't know what the heck is wrong. And she's going to the doctor, and I got this little business going, importing athletic shoes and stuff. And she come home, and I came home early, and she said, I said, so what did the doctor say? She said, oh, I don't know. She gave me some more pills, and she went upstairs, and all of a sudden, my little girl, Barbara, she said, Dad, I heard a thump on the floor. And I went upstairs, and I kicked the bathroom door down. She was laying on the floor dead. And I picked her up. We called the paramedics and all this stuff. And, you know, within inside of moments, people from Alcoholics Anonymous just came out of the woodwork. We happened to be in the same parish that Father Terry was in. Terry came down, gave her the last rites. There was the funeral. I mean, you know, I can make it real tearjerker, and I'm not going to do that. And, you know, it was just the way everybody came together. And, you know, and it was just like when Father Ted died. They had a memorial mass for Ted in Encino, and George was at that mass. And the guy who taught Father Ted in the seminary was one of the priests at this big high mass. The guy was ancient. Ted was ancient when he died. And when we were leaving, I said, George, wasn't it wonderful? And George says, yeah, it really was. I don't know if he even remembers this. He says, I finally feel like I belong. I said, George, you always belonged. He said, but I didn't feel it. And he was right. And I had the same thing with a car that a neighbor gave to me. I was never grateful for anything. Anything good that ever happened to Pat Devaney is because I'm Pat Devaney. Anything bad that happened to Pat Devaney is because I'm Pat Devaney. Case is closed. I am grateful for nothing. I would go to these meetings. They would talk about gratitude. I'd say I don't have any. And I didn't. I was grateful for nothing. And a neighbor of mine gave me a car. Now this car had cancer. And it also had sneakers for tires and a spring coming up on the passenger side. Reverse was forward. It was just a mess. And I had this car. And I was driving over the 405 freeway going to the LAX to pick up some athletic shoes that was sent into this country. So this was before the whole athletic boom. And like around 74 or something like that, 75. And I'm picking up these athletic shoes, and I'm driving over. All of a sudden I said, you know, if I didn't have the vintage, I called this piece of crap the vintage because it had to have a little style. And I said, if I didn't have the vintage, I couldn't go over and pick up these shoes. And if I couldn't pick up the shoes, I couldn't make a little bit of a living. I said, I feel so good that I have the vintage. I feel grateful. I couldn't believe it. I wanted to pull over on the 405 and give the vintage a hug. But I kept going and picked up the shoes. So I mean, it's strange things the way, you know, you get gratitude and everything. So now I have these 4 kids, and I don't know what to do with them. You know, I'm trying to work, got the 4 kids. It was murder. I wanted to put them in the garbage disposal. But, you know, then I found out why God made fathers and mothers. Because I can't be both. I could only be a father. So I would be the father, and I would do, you know, try to do whatever the heck I could for them and everything else. And And things went along, they got better and better and better. And I'd go to these meetings. And when things really started getting good for me, I mean real good, these guys said to me, Pat, we thought things would never get good for you. I said, you told me for years, don't drink and it'll get better. So, all that good. Eventually, I had the Nike salesmen. They were my sales reps. I mean, I was manufacturing running clothes at the time. Things were absolutely great. I'm going to meetings, and then all of a sudden, Nike says their salesmen can no longer carry any other lines except Nike. I went from being a real genius to being a moron again. It was real easy, just like that. So now, I'm upside down again. I'm getting broker, and then I start doing business in Mexico, and I'm going to meetings, and I refused to go to a meeting in Mexico City, and I started to feel bad, and I finally found one. The sucker was around the corner from this apartment house this apartment we rented. And I went to the meeting. That was the most depressing meeting I have ever been to in Alcoholics Anonymous. Everybody was from a foreign country, and nobody was happy. I was happy. I looked like a shining star. That's how bad these folks were. This meeting was horrible. And it was an English-speaking meeting. I had a big problem, and I went to, I was downtown, and there was a big lawyers thing that was going on, and I was down at the courthouse, and I was walking around the block. I was early, and I see this triangle outside. I look, maybe that's an AA meeting. I'm walking around the block, I still see the triangle. All of a sudden, there's nobody standing outside. They're all inside. So I walk inside. It was a Spanish-speaking meeting, and I sat down at that meeting, and I listened. I understood casa, and ha, 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 ha. They were all laughing, and it was different things. I left there, I felt great. I didn't understand a word they guys were saying in general, and there's just magic in the room. And things eventually got real good for me. I live up in San Luis Obispo County now in Shell Beach. Ruth and I have been up there for it's going to be close to 8 years now. And I'm in the car wash business, in case you're ever up there. You can't, and if you want to get a car wash in San Luis Obispo County, you must come to me. Because we're the only show now. So, anyway, it's almost 5 of. I won't disappoint your secretary. And Alcoholics Anonymous has, really given me everything that I have. There was a guy at this meeting, this men's stag I go to up there. The guy went to Norway a couple of weeks ago, and he said, I could never go to Norway. I'd still be sitting in my living room drinking and drinking. He said, but Alcoholics Anonymous has enabled me, to make these trips and everything. I'm going to make a nice trip too in a couple of weeks. And I owe it all. I owe everything to Alcoholics Anonymous. And as Father Ted said and Dick said, surrender, and that's when we win. Thanks a lot.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. If that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.